Beings are not introduced immediately into the organizations of duty which begin above the stage of humanity, that is, above the hydrogen atom cycle. For this, it is necessary to have attained a proper level of comprehension in accordance with the necessities of the plan of duty. And this occurs only after a long, even longer cycle of preparation, starting from the most primitive stages of the hydrogen cosmos to its uppermost stages. We had previously talked about the phases needed to pass through for the comprehension to acquire such a merit of duty, starting from the initial state of being to the state of highest level human beings. At the beginning of these phases, as a start for the most primitive advancement of organization system, a kind of communal life begins in plants, with automatic mechanical instincts. These communities become more comprehensive as the lives of beings advance and widen their meaning. In animals, this community is rather clearer. Although a community life has not yet started, meaningful ensembles, expressing the preliminaries towards it, exist among animals. Automatic ensembles of ants, bees, and some animals that live together as a group are examples of these. These are the organized preparations of those beings which are candidates for communal plans in human life. Naturally, there are superior influences and bonds that connect them to each other. And these come from the beings in duty working at these fields. In this way, ant colonies are organized to collect their winter provision, similarly, bee colonies, as well. Sometimes, in order to protect their nests against the preying eagles, all storks around gather and fight against these monsters as an army. Some wild animals, when they are hungry, make a herd and hunt. These states, which are frequently seen among animals, are brought out by influences sent by the beings in duty to allow them to do the instinctual application of the preparations for a superior communal plan. Finally come the gatherings and communal lives of mankind, which are again partly automatic and partly semi-comprehending. Here then start the direct and closest preliminary applications of attaining higher duty organizations. And the purpose of human life is to complete the necessary preparations on this path. Furthermore, there is the reciprocal organism state of the being that builds and governs a human, with the body of that man. That being, by prevailing on the magnetic field it constituted out of the human nervous system cells, governs the whole body, the organism through these cells. Here, the being is the organizer and the body is the organism. Activities of all these ensembles, of these organizations, of these systems, of every matter ensemble, of communal systems, of combinations, their relations to each other. In short, each event, each state, everything, is ensured only by this mechanism of influences within the great harmony of the divine order. At each organism, there arrives a great number of secondary and lateral influences. From above, from sides, from beneath. That among these there are both positive influences facilitating the duty of that organization and negative influences which are jarring, disruptive and even destructive in order to strengthen it, to increase its refining experiences, to develop and evolve it. And these cause the occurrences of the applications of this organism for tests and trials, experience and observation. All of these secondary influences come from a great number of beings working with comprehension, or automatically for the cultivation of that organism. These beings in duty, connected to the sublime universe mechanism, put many events which are aggravating, obstructing and sometimes precluding, as evolutionary material, on the path of beings, in order to make ground for them to display efforts which will allow them to succeed in their duty within their bodily lives. These materials are regulated and ordered in accordance with the laws of the divine order, in order to enable beings to increase their merit, to strengthen and to ascend by shifting to higher states. However, because of their ignorance, mankind always considers these as disasters befalling them. We have said that organizations, as ascending higher and higher, come to an end at the unitary which is in the uppermost boundary of universe. Until they reach the unitary, these organization components, adapting to the sublime necessities of the original principle, gradually unite, such that, at the time they enter the unitary, their comprehensions have adapted to the sublime necessities at every point and with complete merit, except a few small nuances, and then, they continue with sublime, universe-encompassing activities, without obeying the imperatives of organizer, organ as they have done downwards, within a single and immense unity of organization which cannot be grasped by the minds of mankind. This is a truth where the force of the original principle belonging to the universe and spirits joins with all possibilities of our universe. Looking at this side of it, from our point of view, we call it the unitary. For, the powers of the original principle belonging to spirits and universe constitute a unity there with the whole universe. Therefore, as organizations get closer to the unitary, with the corresponding increase in comprehensions, freedoms and responsibilities, the speed of the progress towards unity increases. States of organizer-organ relations increasingly loosen and eventually vanish. Then, the universal unity that we call the unitary is established. Further explanation will be given on this topic. At the initial sections of the cosmoses, in the initial crude hydrogen stage, there are not yet beings that spirits can govern. Because of this, such an organization system cannot be of question for them, and even ensembles of these spirits cannot be thought of. Here an administrative system exists which cannot be grasped by the minds of mankind, established by the original influences and allowing the mechanical evolutions of spirits. And under this administrative system, spirits are mechanically drifted on paths designated in accordance with the divine order. Through these applications in this manner, which take a very long time and have been passed through by spirits in passive states, these primitive spirits ascend gradually to the stage of being. A body in the stage of being is an organism, as well. In it, among the particles constituting it, there are organizing and systemizations, as well. Because of this, as we have mentioned above, instead of the original principle's prime influences which pertain to matter, alongside the secondary influences, the original principle's powers pertaining to spirits, which we call evolutionary values, arrive at it from all around. Of course, these secondary influences are not unattended either. These are also states of the two basic influences we had previously mentioned as entering the universe, which are transmitted outside as altered after passing through beings and bodies. More correctly, these are the magnetic fields of beings. These secondary influences arrive at their targets on time, as needed and as regulated without even the smallest deviation, according to the individual and communal evolutionary needs of spirits, and in accordance with the approbation and designation of the unitary. These influences, which are never unattended, are transmitted to the targets which are approved and designated for themselves, as subjected to a great number of administration, control and assistance mechanisms. Although these most often exhibit a scene of disharmony and defeatism with thousands of conflicts, battles, controversies and dissensions among themselves, this state is an exterior appearance. In truth, all these are technical necessities of the compositions and mechanisms that occur to ensure the evolutionary imperatives, and their opposite appearances which are deceptive to mankind. Now, let us talk, as much as necessary, about some of the mechanisms belonging to the devices of influences fluxing into matter. As we said previously, an influence's arrival at a matter means the transfer of some very subtle particles, that is, of values which have very sublime motions from the magnetic field of the influencer matter into the magnetic field of recipient matter. It occurs like this. From the magnetic field of the influencer matter, which has power and merit to respond to the need of the recipient matter, and influence departs. On the other hand, recipient matter or the being assumes an attitude, as if inviting, by extending a part of its own magnetic field towards this influence, which is intended to reach it. More correctly, it starts to send out influences which we call initiator influences. We show the wishes, desires, needs, efforts and prayers of mankind as an example of this group of initiator influences. Prayers may be reflected up above, to a certain distance. The length of these distances depends on the sincerity, rightness and degree of intensity of the wishes the prayers offer above while praying. Some prayers cannot traverse long distances, and remain below. These are weak, and because of this they do not encounter beings powerful enough to realize them. And this should be so. Some prayers can reach up to very long distances. These are powerful wishes, coming from the essence and founded on true evolutionary needs. There are more possibilities for these prayers, which can reach powerful beings, to be realized. In the same way, as these initiator influences start to move, like signals transmitted from an airfield to a plane, in order to meet the first influence on its way, the first secondary influence that needs to land on this field as well starts to come out as comprehending, semi-comprehending, even sometimes automatically from its source, and to advance towards the field it will land on. However, as we have said, this first influence is not unattended. Another secondary influence accompanies it from a more comprehending source, to show it the direction of the target it will reach, which we call the guiding influence. This guiding influence is sympathetic to the first influence. Nevertheless, the guiding influence is rather crude. Even if the consciousness and comprehension of the source it has come out from are superior to the first influence, it does not have the power for homing itself to the magnetic field which is expecting it. However, its attuned state for directly sympathizing with the first influence makes it possible to accompany that. If that was all, these could not reach the target anyway. There are two reasons for this. First of all, because the guiding influence does not have the scope of comprehension encompassing the all, it can deviate. That is, there are other magnetic fields with which the first influence can sympathize. Because of their needs, they can also send a signal for those kinds of influences. However, this first influence should not go to these. So, because of this deficiency of the guiding influence in this regard, it is possible for it to be deceived by the signals given by the other fields, and to direct the direction of the first influence to one of these. Secondly, it is possible for it to encounter a great number of interference influences that have the power to intercept the first influence, advancing in its direction and to alter its disposition or its course, even to destroy it. So, the guiding influences are not in a state that can withstand these interferences, which are sometimes very strong. The first influence, when it stays unprotected against these offenses, can degenerate midway and become dysfunctional or can drift somewhere else or be dissipated. However, in the divine order, derangement of order is never allowed, such as states of impending and disrupting of an event, or of giving ill results. Because of this, impediment prevention devices are established. As for that system, besides the guiding influence that comes with the first influence, superior secondary influences come out from the sources of duty. These have a higher comprehension and accompany this consignment. We call them propulsive influences, which means dispatching influences. Propulsive influences are stronger influences, ensuring the first influence finds its way and protecting it from the offensive, random interference influences and, if necessary, destroying these disruptive influences. It is similar to this. Let us take a train, at the front of which there is a railway car and behind it, there is a locomotive. A machinist drives and controls the locomotive. Here, the railway car symbolizes the first influence, the locomotive symbolizes the guiding influence, and the machinist symbolizes the propulsive influence, albeit broadly. And signals given from the station to be reached indicate the initiator influence. In this way, when this train of influence arrives at the magnetic field of the recipient, because the duties of guiding and propulsive influences are accomplished at the threshold of that field, these accompanying influences leave the first influence at the boundary of the field and separate from it. And the first influence, through the activities it will bring out in that field, as in accordance with its purpose, effects the necessary changes upon the matter structure to which that field is subject, disrupts that matter's equilibrium, causing it to make various motions, displacing it, changing its states and forms. In short, it brings out the miscellaneous events on that matter in relation to its intensity and direction, but always by utilizing the duality principle and value differentiation mechanism. However, it should be remembered that all of these are always under the supervision of the sublime influences mechanism.